Ever wonder how top management consultants can walk into a totally chaotic situation and, like magic, bring structure and a clear path forward? Well, it's not magic. They have a secret weapon, a proven toolkit for turning vague ideas into concrete action. It's called the 7 Management Tools, and in this explainer, we're opening up that exact toolkit for you. You know the feeling, right? You're staring at a whiteboard that's just a mess of conflicting opinions, brainstorming notes, maybe a dozen different stakeholders all wanting different things. There's gold in there, somewhere, but it's all qualitative. It's a jungle of words and ideas. You can't just plug it into a spreadsheet. This is a classic challenge, and frankly, it's where most teams get completely bogged down. But here's the thing. You don't have to get stuck. The solution is to stop trying to force number-based tools onto word-based problems. What you need is a structured approach, a repeatable method to wrangle those ideas, figure out how they relate to each other, and build a real, actionable plan. This is how you bring clarity to the chaos. So here's our game plan. We're going to walk through this toolkit using a core consulting principle, MECE. That's M-E-C-E. It stands for Mutually Exclusive, Collectively Exhaustive. Basically, it means we'll cover everything with no overlaps and no gaps. We'll hit 3 MECE phases. First, structuring ideas, then analyzing relationships, and finally, planning for action. And we'll wrap up with your first actionable step. The framework we're diving into is officially known as the 7 Management Tools, or the 7M Tools. Fun fact, they came out of Japan's Total Quality Management movement, and they were designed specifically to handle the messy stuff. Customer feedback, brainstorming sessions, strategic debates, all that non-numerical data that actually holds the keys to breakthrough improvements. Okay, first, a really important distinction. You might have heard of the 7 QC tools, or quality control tools. Those are for your quantitative data, your hard numbers. Think histograms, control charts, that kind of thing. The 7M tools we're talking about today are their strategic counterpart. They're built for qualitative data, for words, ideas, and language. They don't replace the QC tools, they work right alongside them. Let's jump into phase 1, structuring ideas. This is where you start when you're just drowning in raw information. These first couple of tools are all about creating order out of that initial chaos. It's about building a solid, logical foundation for everything else we're going to do. Our first tool is the affinity diagram, sometimes called the KJ method. This is your absolute go-to for making sense of brainstorming chaos. You know that wall covered in a million Post-it notes? The affinity diagram is how you take that mess and physically group those notes into clusters that just feel right, revealing the big ideas that were hidden in all that noise. Now, the process here looks simple, but it is incredibly powerful. First, everyone writes down their ideas silently and individually. This is key because it prevents groupthink from taking over. Next, the team starts moving the notes around, grouping similar ideas together, still without talking. Only after the clusters are formed does the discussion begin, as you create a title for each group. And then, and don't skip this part, you use those organized themes to define actual workable projects. So once your affinity diagram has helped you pinpoint a big theme or project, the tree diagram is your perfect next step. This tool helps you systematically break down that big idea into smaller and smaller pieces. You're basically creating a visual map, moving from the big picture goal all the way down to the nitty-gritty means of getting it done. The engine of this whole tool is a simple, repeated question. How? You start with your main goal, let's say on the left side of the page, and you ask, okay, how are we going to achieve this? The answers become your first level of branches. Then, for each of those branches, you ask how again, and again, and again, until you've broken it all the way down to individual, actionable tasks. It's a fantastic way to make sure nothing gets missed. All right, we've structured our ideas, we've got neat little piles, but that's not enough, right? Now we've got to move to phase 2, analyzing relationships. We need to understand how these ideas influence each other. This next set of tools is all about uncovering that hidden web of cause and effect, so you can find the real drivers of a problem, not just the symptoms. The interrelationship digraph is just perfect for those super complex situations where the root cause is definitely not obvious. You take the key themes you found with the affinity diagram and you literally map out the web of influence between them. You draw arrows from one idea to another, showing which one causes or influences the other. And pretty soon, a visual map of the system's hidden logic starts to appear. And here's the best part. Once you've drawn all the arrows, the analysis is almost laughably simple. You just count the arrows. The ideas that have the most arrows going out of them, those are your key drivers, your root causes. The ideas with the most arrows coming in, those are your key outcomes or effects. It's brilliant. Focus your energy on the drivers, and you'll see a ripple effect across the whole system. Next up is the matrix diagram. This adds a fantastic layer of data-driven thinking to our analysis. It lets you systematically evaluate the relationship between two different sets of things. For example, you can map the process inputs that you control against the customer outcomes that they care about. This is how you directly connect your day-to-day work to what actually matters to your customer. And this chart just shows you exactly how it works. Look, across the top, you've got what the customer wants, and you rate how important it is to them. So output A is a really high priority, a 9. Down the side, you list the things your team does, your process inputs. Then you just score the connection. How much does input X affect output A? A lot, so it gets a 9. Then you just do the math. The math makes the decision for you. It's practically screaming. Focus on process input X. Okay, our last tool in this analysis phase is the prioritization matrix. Now, unlike the last one, this isn't really about hard math. It's more about having a smart, structured conversation. The whole point is to get all the key stakeholders in a room to agree on the project's trade-offs before you start the work. It's all about getting aligned on what success really means. The process is basically a guided negotiation. First, you get the right people together. Then, you have an honest talk about what a win looks like for this project. The real magic happens in step 3, where you decide which factors, like budget, timeline, or scope, you're going to constrain, meaning it's set in stone, accept, meaning it's flexible, or enhance, meaning it's what you're really trying to max out. This simple exercise forces a realistic conversation and prevents so many arguments down the road. And that brings us to our final phase, planning for action. We've structured our ideas, we've analyzed how they connect. Now it's time to turn all that insight into a rock-solid plan for getting things done. These last 2 tools are all about execution, risk management, and scheduling. First up is the Process Decision Program Chart, or PDPC. Honestly, you can just think of this as a structured premortem. Before you launch your brilliant new plan, the PDPC forces you and your team to stop and systematically ask, okay, what could go wrong here? It helps you spot potential risks and problems for every single step of your plan. And this is the important part, come up with countermeasures in advance. You actually start with the tree diagram of your project that we talked about earlier. Then, for each little task at the very bottom of the tree, you brainstorm all the things that could go wrong. This is where your team's experience is just golden. You then weed out the really far-fetched problems, and for the real, credible risks that are left, you figure out a specific, proactive response. This is how you turn a hopeful plan into a resilient one. Our 7th and final tool is the Activity Network Diagram, which you might know as a PERT or CPM chart. Now that we have a risk-aware plan, this tool helps us manage the actual timeline. It gives you a flowchart of all the project tasks, showing not just their sequence, but crucially, the dependencies between them. What has to finish before something else can start? And this diagram reveals something absolutely vital, the critical path. That is the longest sequence of dependent tasks in your whole project. See here? The path from A to B to D takes 10 days total. Even though task C is happening at the same time, this project cannot be finished in less than 10 days. Any delay on that critical path automatically delays the entire project. This tells you exactly where you need to focus your attention to keep things on schedule. So, let's wrap this all up into that MEIS framework. It's a really logical 3-phase flow. First, you structure your ideas with affinity and tree diagrams to create order from chaos. Second, you analyze the relationships with the interrelationship diagram and matrix tools to find your true points of leverage. And finally, you plan for action using the PDPC and activity network diagram to build a truly robust plan for execution. So there you have it, the consultant's toolkit for tackling those messy, qualitative challenges. But look, this isn't just interesting theory, it's a set of practical step-by-step methods. So the real question isn't whether you understand these tools. The question is, which one of your current challenges right now are you going to apply one of these tools to this week? Because that's how you turn learning into real results.